Welcome back to the Ivinson Mansion. Today we are filming part 6. You will get to see our guest room, sewing room, and the second floor foyer. So this is our map exhibit. It was put together by our senior docent Kim Viner and geologist Alan Verploeg. Over here, our first map shows Fort Sanders. This one was created by William Owen, or Billy Owen, whose family were pioneers of Laramie, and he was a surveyor, very famous actually during his time, and he was a rock climber, etc., etc. Anyways, Fort Sanders. This map was created in 1887, and it was to survey the land that the military base was on. So Fort Sanders began in 1866. It was to protect travelers on the Overland Trail. The Overland Trail was created as an alternative route west and east from the Oregon Trail. It was unsafe due to attacks from Native Americans as well as brigands. So the Overland Trail for a time offered safer passage. It was decommissioned in 1882. So this is my favorite map of Laramie. It was done in 1875, and the reason it's my favorite map is because the street names had not been established yet. So if you look closely, you'll notice Center Street, A, B, C, D, and then the same on the other side. And so if you look in the directories, there's references to North A and South A. Can be quite confusing, but sometime in the late 1900s, they decided to give the streets actual names. Center is University, South A turned into Ivinson Avenue, and so on. Mr. Kim Viner did do a nice article on the streets, so that can be found online also. So over here I have the 1885 map. This was done by E. Whiting, a civil engineer from Denver. This map is significant because it shows some of the hallmark buildings in Laramie, including the East Side School, W. Holliday's big store, and the Union Pacific rolling mills have been completed. So this map shows Laramie in 1894. The significant development in this map is the University of Wyoming. You can see it here between 9th and 13th Street, and there is not much beyond. We have a hospital and the cemetery. So Laramie is still much bigger than our 1885 map, but definitely much smaller than what it is today. Also, what's neat about this map is you can see Undine Park. So this is the last map in our series. It was made in 1963, and you can see the red route right here is I-80 incompleted. Also interesting, the city's much bigger. The university is right where that green spot is, and below it you can see the southern part of Laramie has grown considerably.
So the exhibit featured in our sewing room is a look at suffrage in a slightly different way than we did last year. And so we're actually looking at suffrage through the change in women's clothes from 1900 to 1950. And so right here I have a dress from 1900, and as you can see, it's very tight. It has a 1900 corset, which was reinvented in 1900 to supposedly help women's spines, but what it did was it actually encouraged an S curve. So as you can see from her posture, her chest is very lean forward, and then it curves into the bustle at the end. And so not so great on your spine, creating that S curve. But you can also see she has some very large leg of mutton sleeves, and this lapel detail here on the collar. So over here you can see that we have a dress from 1910, and you're going to recognize this if you're a fan of the movie like Titanic, where we have these transition dresses between 1900 and the wildly different 1920s. What we have different here is, one, the sleeves become a lot less restrictive and the differences in the bodice, but we still have that very tight, restricted waist. Also, you can see she has a very large hat. Those were very, very popular in 1900. So this is our dress from 1920, and as you can see, there's a lot of difference between the 1900 dress and the 1920s dress, although there are some similar features that might not be apparent right off the bat. But what we have is, in the 1920s, it became very popular to have a drop waist, which means the dress doesn't really have a structured waist like in 1900 or 1910. Also, the length of the skirt comes up a fair bit, and as you can see, the sleeves were a lot less restrictive than even the 1910 dress. So this is our dress from 1930s, and one of the interesting things that comes up in 1930s women's fashion is bias cut dresses, where people making dresses and fashion houses started using the fabric differently and cutting it on the bias so that it became much more flowy and easier to work with. And so in this 30s dress, you can see that it's just a little different than the 1920s dress. It is a little more conservative. The length does come down to below your knee, and we get these much more interesting bodices where there are actual designs placed on the top of the dress. So this is our 1940s dress. And as you can see, in the 1940s, colors become just a little more conservative during the war years. So reds, blues, blacks, army green were very popular, as well as belted waists, where it was a cinched waist on top of an A-line skirt. So this is the last dress in our exhibit. This is 1950s, and as you can see, kind of similar to 1940, we still have that cinched waist, but different than the 1940s dress, we have these wide circle skirts that come into fashion, and so they create a much more swingy silhouette. As you can see, I've got a much shorter sleeve, and then in the 50s it becomes very popular to use prints, and we see a reduction in those conservative wartime colors, and we start seeing all these beautiful pinks and yellows and that kind of stuff. So.
The second floor foyer was a private space for the Ivinson family, but according to oral histories, was also used to entertain a single guest or a small group. It is also said that Jane enjoyed spending time in this room, fond of the sun through the stained glass windows in the stairwell tower.
Thanks for joining us, everybody, for part 6 of our videos, and have a good rest of your weekend.